Weapons boasts a shit ton of cinematic firepower. This new horror film is stacked and jacked with scares, dark comedy, action, great performances, multiple points of view, and a deep thematic resonance that never detracts from the movie's devious sense of playfulness. If anything, Weapons features meaningful storytelling layering without ever forgetting to have fun. Well, fun if you're a sadist, which, judging by the box office receipts, is a fucking lot of us. But anyway, the point. Weapons just features a multitude of moving and intersecting parts, and often disparate ones at that all gel together in miraculous fashion, creating a cohesive movie-going experience that thrills, contains a deeper intellectual meaning, and champions high entertainment value, and doing so all while featuring moments where the audience can laugh our asses off at some truly ridiculous shit. Because Weapons can do it all. It's a Swiss Army knife of a movie that both cuts and fucks. What I'm trying to say is that this movie is excellent. Weapons spawns from the wonderfully deranged mind of Zach Cregger, a man who has had an interesting career arc, to say the least. After all, he has numerous acting credits to his name, and was previously most well known for being a part of the late 2000s, early 2010s sketch comedy troupe known as The Whitest Kids You Know, all alongside some other adjacent comedic projects since then. Now, I'm pretty nostalgic for The Whitest Kids You Know, because honestly, a lot of it still remains funny. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln ruining Hamlet is my jam. Regardless, the point here is that Cregger's past work is involved with comedies and lighter sort of fare, not horror movies. However, this changed with 2022's Barbarian, Cregger's first horror movie, and the first wide-release feature film he directed since the critically panned Miss March back in 2009. Written by Cregger as well, Barbarian is a terrific horror movie with various twists and turns and inspired narrative decisions and risk-taking. It's a film that subverts expectations, but does so in a way that is diegetic to the logic of the story and reflects a deeper layer of meaning. It was, in my humble opinion, fucking exceptional. And Weapons acts as a terrific sophomore outing in the horror genre for Cregger as both a writer and director. Hell, this new film is even more ambitious than Barbarian. Expanding upon many of the stylistic and creative ideas of Barbarian, Weapons amplifies Barbarian's darkly comical element, haunting mystery, and unconventional editing structure to extraordinary effect. Set in Pennsylvania suburbia, Weapons' plot revolves around how, on one fateful night, an entire classroom of elementary school students, except for one, simultaneously woke up, got out of bed, opened the door, ran outside, and disappeared without a trace. Cause man, that unmarked van outside must have had a shit ton of candy. Or at the very least, some $50 gift cards for Roblox. Naturally, this creates panic within the town, and as the days go by without any meaningful new updates to the case, the parents of these missing children, as well as the community at large, desperately search for these kids, as well as someone to blame. Though I personally blame Paw Patrol, those fascists. So yeah, Weapons begins with a very compelling mystery. A true confounding quagmire, search confusion thesaurus, causing us all to wonder, what happened to these kids? Why was one kid spared from being disappeared when the rest of the class wasn't? What lured those children out? Did a monster do it? Or did a person do it? Or worse, did a monster person do it? The world would like to know. And these questions posed by Weapons' opening fuel the audience's initial interest in this film, all before we eventually become emotionally invested with its lead protagonist. Or at least, sort of. See, Weapons doesn't feature a traditional lead character. The film tells its story from multiple points of view, following a specific character for a certain amount of time, all before transitioning to the perspective of another character's activities and actions during that same time frame. Which on the surface sounds like the Rashomon effect, no relation. For those unaware, because you wrongly believe that the humanities are a waste of time, money, and education, Rashomon is a 1950 film by acclaimed Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. The plot of the movie revolves around a crime scene and visually retells the events of the crime from 4 different, very opposing perspectives, prompting the audience to question the truth and the reliability of these characters' versions of events, which is a storytelling structure that became very very influential and has been utilized in many movies and TV shows ever since then, like an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, an episode of Batman the Animated Series, and also in the somewhat recent Ridley Scott film The Last Duel, meaning that the Rashomon effect is a narrative format that many filmmakers and writers gravitate towards and choose to emulate in their work in some form. Now, what does weapons have to do with the Rashomon effect? Honestly, not really fucking anything. Yeah, that last paragraph was kind of irrelevant. But it is interesting, isn't it? Hey, I have to apply my higher education to something in my life, god damn it. Let me have this. While weapons transitions from viewpoint to viewpoint roughly over the same period of time within the narrative, these characters' perspectives, while very different, don't contradict each other. There's never a moment where we, the audience, believe these characters' narratives are unreliable. Or well, to the audience at least. Because for sure, these characters can be unreliable to other characters. I personally give Piglet Han Solo 5 Pinocchios. Now to return full jerkle to the points that I was trying to make a few minutes ago, but got distracted because my daily dose of Adderall has clearly worn off. Weapons doesn't have a conventional main character, considering that this film jumps from perspective to perspective, protagonist to protagonist, dust to dust, fade to black. But if Weapons did have a central protagonist, it's arguably Julia Garner's Justine. And no, I'm not saying that just because Garner has top billing, though of course that does help her case in the court of IMDb. But rather, Justine is Weapons' first perspective that we follow, and is honestly the heart and soul of the movie. After all, Justine is the elementary school teacher of the class that vanished, meaning that not only does she feel terrible and is in deep emotional anguish for the students who went missing, but Justine inevitably attracts the ire of suburban Americana due to guilt by association and a false belief that correlation equals causation. Because from the parents' perspective, Justine is the common denominator. After all, nearly her entire class disappeared, which, for many understandably frustrated yet still small-minded parents, is enough evidence that Justine is somehow involved, creating a 21st century witch hunt. And Justine was the correct choice to lead off Weapons' multi-perspective narrative, as well as the film's thematic storytelling, primarily because she acts as an emotional anchor for the audience. Sure, Weapons' overall mystery is what initially hooks us in the first place, but still a captivating narrative enigma alone generally can only go so far in terms of maintaining audience interest, especially in the year 2025 ADHD. A movie like this usually requires emotional weight as well, and Justine delivers that crucial emotional connection. In terms of the story, Justine's heart aches for her missing students, and thus we, as an audience, care for those kids as well. And when members of the community wrongfully target Justine, we in the audience further empathize with her plight, because Justine is hurting almost as much as the kids' parents are. These are her students, and ones that she shepherds about 7-ish hours a day and 5 days a week. Because naturally, a good teacher, like Justine, will agonize over the disappearance of these children. And yet, the community has the damn nerve to blame Justine? Fuck off. Those of you watching this video right now, which is all of you because you're watching this video right now, can probably tell that I'm a little heated. And admittedly, that's to the movie's credit, because I really clicked with Justine as a character and sympathized with her troubles. So when the parents circled the blame wagons around her, I was incensed. To quote the basketball ambassador, I took that personally. Justine's struggles work thematically as well. Though, let me be clear, I'm still wrapping my overly large dome over Weapons' ultimate meaning, so when I say themes or thematic storytelling, I'm primarily referring to my interpretation of the story. Something that is especially important to note, considering that, according to director Zach Cregger, some narrative, thematic, and even visual elements like the evocative giant assault rifle floating over a house, I really hope the safety is on, weren't placed into the movie for a deliberate narrative or thematic purpose, aside from, oh, that seems cool, meaning that weapons will feature many unique perspectives from various viewers, critics, and etc. But with my interpretation of the story being the correct one, of course. See, from my interpretation, the overall narrative parallels that of a school shooting, a sadly common tragedy in real-life America that many Americans have accepted as just being a part of life, despite how we are the only country that has such a rampant mass shooting problem on such a colossal scale. And when these mass casualty events occur, victims, families, and the public at large often search for someone to blame or something to explain away these horrific events. How some of the worst fart-sniffing fuckfaces on the planet will exploit these tragedies by funneling conspiracy theories to low-trust viewers and readers. See Alex Jones in Infowars, though in court, Jones seems to have lost the information war. However, Weapons doesn't really deal with that variety of conspiracy theorist crank. But it was worth mentioning because I will never shy away from verbally kicking garbage that belongs in its natural habitat, which is to say, the trash. Thank you for tolerating my indulgence. In real-life school shootings, and mass shootings in general, a variety of causes and even people are often wrongfully viewed as being culpable in some form or another. In fact, sometimes the broader public incorrectly antagonizes the mentally ill, those of marginalized racial or religious backgrounds, or even analyzing any potential faults, real or not, regarding authority figures, officials, and such committed during these tragic events that may have unintentionally aided a mass shooter in achieving their goal, magnifying all of their past actions beneath the microscope of public opinion, as well as the general public assuming guilt without knowing all of the facts. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's teachers or other school workers who are incorrectly vilified as being liable, as was the case in Uvalde, Texas. Furthermore, teachers and other types of educators are currently being vilified by the broader public as well as some political entities. There are accusations of ideological indoctrination, parents wanting more control over what happens in the classroom, book bans, and so on and so forth. It's just another notable way that parents and other entities just distrust public education as a whole, and thus question the intentions and actions of educators. And Weapons reflects this wedge between educators and the general public, because we, the audience, know that Justine cares for the well-being of her students and that she did not harm those kids. Yet the public routinely scapegoats Justine, presuming her of committing nefarious wrongdoing without providing any tangible proof. Hell, one parent even digs up past dirt on her, putting Justine's life under the earlier mentioned microscope to reveal some faults in her as a human being. Because God forbid if teachers can make mistakes too, because they're actual people, not fucking Cybermen. Yes, Justine isn't treated fairly. She is terrorized, causing her mental health, when combined with her grief over the missing students, to nosedive into a tailspin. Though luckily for her, Justine is also the Silver Surfer. Additionally, Justine has an active stake in the narrative as she investigates some oddities that seem out of place, contradictory, and suspicious, ensuring that Justine isn't just sympathetic, but has narrative agency as well. So yes, Justine is a protagonist that's easy to empathize with, as well as someone that we just want to see succeed, which grounds us, the popcorn guzzlers, into the drama of this narrative. Because through Justine, the stakes of this already intriguing mystery have become personal. The stakes further stab towards our cold, dead vampiric hearts through Josh Brolin's Archer, Weapon's second point of view character. See, Archer's son was one of the children from Justine's class that disappeared, and Archer isn't taking the whole grieving thing very well. I guess there weren't any dad books in the genre of my son and his classmates vanished without a trace. Dr. Seuss dropped the fucking ball on that one. But anyway, the point. Archer is reeling from this loss. He's having understandable mental lapses at work, and off the clock, he is determined to find his son. This also allows Archer, no relation, to be sympathetic despite being one of the primary parents who is harassing Justine, which is a condemnable action, even with the fact that Archer's sympathetic perspective remains understandable, meaning that adjacent to Justine, we we empathize with Archer and find him interesting, seeing as he also drives a lot of the action in the story. He's just an engaging character to follow. Weapons contains numerous other POV perspectives as well, but they're perspectives that I don't really want to spoil in today's video. But what I will say is that they do add a lot of meat to the overall narrative, as well as offering key evidence that director Zach Cregger might hate cops, even more so than Pig Destroyer. Each new perspective within Weapons' immense multi-character narrative with numerous points of intersection slowly but surely unravels this mystery's tangled web of what the fuck by introducing new critical plot elements and doing so in a way that is incredibly well paced, slowly spoon-feeding us with new important and addicting details as if it were from a gallon of PCP. Weapons just dishes out new reveals at slow intermittent intervals, but does so just quick enough to where each new revelation feels like a game changer, further hooking us on this narrative via a rewarding movie-going experience. Now, it's time to discuss some of Weapons' heavier themes. However, we did already broach the topic of school shootings, so that statement I just made might be a little late. So, shit. Weapons' core narrative and thematic purpose is to represent grief, and more specifically, the grief experienced by writer and director Zach Cregger. See, in the middle of a fateful night in 2021, Trevor Moore tragically and unexpectedly died at the age of 41. Moore was Cregger's friend, longtime collaborator, and the ringleader of the Whitest Kids You Know, the earlier mentioned comedy troupe that Cregger was a key part of. Understandably, Moore's loss hit Cregger hard, and thus Cregger penned Weapons, using the screenplay as a creative outlet to process his grief, a feeling that permeates every aspect of this film. In interviews, Cregger described that many of the characters' points of view in the film represent, alongside a past history with alcoholism, actual feelings he experienced whilst grieving, which makes sense because the characters in Weapons often display emotions and enact actions that we associate with grief. Things like depression, anger, denial, addiction, and even bargaining. Weapons just runs the entire gamut of sorrow, and thematically speaking, the film doesn't pull its punches or opt for a sunny side, easy way out regarding this portrayal of immense grief, which was overall a very good creative decision, mostly because grief, particularly grief over the loss of a beloved family member or a friend who passed away, rarely concludes with a favorable resolution. Sure, there might be acceptance, but even that outcome isn't optimal compared to what we truly desire, which is to say, we want our friend and family member to return to light, something that's sadly impossible and unrealistic, and Weapons smartly reflects this. In fact, the film's portrayal of grief is humanizing because it feels real, both in the sense of depression, but also in hope and finding ways to continue on, meaning that there isn't a wishy-washy cop-out to Weapons' intense themes, and the movie is all the better for it, because through its characters, Weapons accurately embodies the grieving process, and I respect that. Similarly, I hope that you can respect the fact that I will be wearing sunglasses in this next section, as this in front of the camera bit is a little longer than usual, and thus I need to wear these glasses to hide the fact that I'm reading from a script, because my ADHD memory can't retain more than 6 words at any given time, let alone 2 paragraphs. And it's important for me to get this section right and with as few edits as possible, seeing as this next topic is very important to me. It's very personal. That topic being how much I relate to Weapons' themes and motifs surrounding grief. Speaking personally, a friend of mine passed away a few years ago, someone with whom I shared a trauma bond with due to how we met one another in an untraditional setting, with me being at one of the lowest points of my life. And even though our lives drifted apart geographically and the fact that we hadn't messaged each other in years, I was still heartbroken when I received that call informing me of their death. I was shocked, saddened, and angry, and despite being ignorant to the cause of death, out of respect for their family I didn't want to pry, I felt guilty in that maybe I should have contacted them more. Maybe despite our lives moving on in new directions, I should have actively tried to talk to them. Like, logically I know their death isn't my fault, but grief is often as illogical as it is intense. It's unforgiving. And admittedly, I'm not saying all this woe is me shit because of pity, but instead I'm mentioning my recentish mental health struggles because I can confirm the authenticity of Weapons' overall thesis statement about grief. The protagonists and other POV characters just experience a wide range of emotions that are common in the grieving process. And for that, I applaud Weapons and writer-director Zach Cregger by extension for vulnerably and honestly depicting this tricky subject matter. You have my respect. However, Weapons isn't just a serious movie with something important to say. If anything, the film is a fun cinematic venture with exciting thrills and a wicked sharp sense of wit. In terms of horror, there are numerous jump scares, which admittedly could have been a problem considering that lesser horror films utilize jump scares as a crutch without realizing that a quality jump scare is supposed to act as a crescendo to some well-earned buildup. In fact, a great jump scare requires unsettling imagery, employing creative shot placement, lighting, narratively placing characters in precarious predicaments, and some element of unpredictability in order to deliver an explosive payoff. In other words, a well-executed jump scare requires cinematic foreplay. The movie has to fuck. And thankfully, Weapons fucks in abundance. If anything, the movie swaggers down the block, swinging its Monty Python-sized dick around in an act of pure creative dominance, featuring numerous nightmare-inducing visuals, with one of my favorites occurring during a nighttime scene set at the front door of a creepy-looking house. The type that says, "This is where the bad times happened." In this sequence, the dim lighting amplifies the haunting visage, all before the door slowly creaks open to reveal a dark void inside, reminiscent of the space where my cold, dead heart used to be, which then fuels the audience's imagination as we are left catastrophizing what unpleasant creature or person will emerge from the darkness, as we doubt it'll be the fucking Kool-Aid Man. It's just an impressive and effective sequence, and awesomely enough, Weapons is packed with scenes like this, many of which conclude in a well-earned jump scare, creating a truly bone-chilling cinematic experience. Personally though, I prefer my bones to be deep-fried at Bojangles. God, that's one thing I do miss about living in Georgia. Out of every fast food place, that fried chicken reigns supreme. Hashtag female dicks out for Bojangles. Additionally, Weapons is really damn funny, which admittedly shouldn't be too surprising considering the earlier mentioned sketch comedy background of the film's director, but still, it's worth noting, mainly because the humor is often very complimentary to the movie's more frightening elements, like a chivalrous gentle lady telling her date that she is a good girl, which, yes. If anything, Weapons' comedic attributes never devalue this film's horror identity, but rather its sense of humor often adds some relief between the movie's more tense moments, as well as some catharsis after some of the more frightening sequences. One of my favorites of these occurs during a nightmarish dream sequence, which concludes in an impeccably timed and framed jump scare that makes the audience go, "What the fuck?" To be then followed by the character who experienced that aforementioned nightmare, who promptly wakes up and also yells, "What the fuck?" Meaning that, as a moment, it was pure comedic catharsis. So yes, Weapons is a fun horror movie. Sure, it features deeper meanings and creative choices worthy of video essay spelunking, especially about the film's various themes and storyline interpretations of grief, suburban paranoia, the danger of making assumptions without having all the facts, and etc. But at its core, Weapons is meant to be enjoyed, straddling the line between artistry and entertainment perfectly. And truly, this translates well to Weapons' current critical and commercial success, mainly because, as far as R-rated horror movies go, Weapons is critically acclaimed and raking in a killing at the box office. And given the film's excellent execution of concept and wonderful marriage of cinematic tonal styles, audiences overall viewing Weapons in an overwhelmingly positive light is understandable. If anything, the response befits a film with narrative and thematic layering, as well as a fun entertainment experience that marries horror and comedy. I now pronounce the filmmaker a sick fuck. Weapons just has its cake and eats it too. Which is good, because what's the point of having a cake if you can't eat it? Are you just gonna stare at it? Are you gonna display the cake in a museum? These things have to be thought through. Regardless though, Weapons is a superb horror film, and the rare one that appeases both critics and the masses alike. After all, Weapons can't be described as elevated horror. Aside subgenre that is often inventive, artsy, and avant-garde. A subgenre that critics often revel in, like a 5-year-old diving into a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit, which unfortunately, usually, is a reaction that general audiences don't overwhelmingly reciprocate. As for myself, I do admittedly dig elevated horror. Hell, Robert Eggers is one of my favorite modern filmmakers, and his movies are definitely prime examples of the subgenre. But with that said, I much prefer the term art house horror, because referring to something as elevated, especially to a genre that is often overlooked and shit-talked, is so goddamn pretentious. Like, I know I consider myself to be a decently educated intellectual, but with that said, I'm also a woman of the people. So to tout certain types of horror as being elevated or superior just doesn't really click or vibe with me, because it overall does a disservice to more crowd-pleasing fare that still remains thoughtful and well executed, all while still having a distinct identity. And Weapons exists in that latter category. As a film, it's as inventive as it is thrilling. It's as unique as it is humorous. It's as bold as it is fun. Meaning that even in a stellar year for the horror genre, one that has satisfied both critics and regular moviegoers alike, Weapons is of high caliber.